Hello everyone. This is going to be a video that shows you how to take objects from your 3D package to Xpacker so they can be used in Racetrack Builder. So I've got Xpacker open already, and we'll do the most basic and the very first step you have to do anyway, and that's create a new Xpack. So whatever you want your Xpack to be called, call it that. I'm going to call this example, and then create the Xpack. Now, I had someone ask me not that long ago actually, I've created a new Xpack but it's empty. Why? Well, you haven't put anything in it yet. All you've done is essentially created a box to put things in. You've still got to go and put the things in it afterwards. But anyway, so we'll set a couple of details for it. Today's date, you can set whatever date you like. This is an example of some stuff. And then click save. Now, as soon as you clicked create empty Xpack, it created the folders for you. This didn't actually make the Xpack, this just saved these details into the Xpack. If you have an image that you want to load in, you can. I believe it's JPEG format they use for that, and also any pictures that you want to use as icons in Racetrack Builder, they'll all be JPEGs as well. But the textures that you actually need to be using on the objects are DDS, because that's what Assetto Corsa likes best. So if you have an image, you can load one in. If you don't at the moment, but you're going to make one later, that's fine. Next time you come back to Xpacker, you can just load up this Xpack again, click load at that point and add your image, and it'll automatically add it to the Xpack then. So this has created the Xpack, and I'll actually show you that. There it is, example, and it's created a textures folder, an objects folder, materials folder, and a cross sections folder. And if you create a string object, it will automatically create a string objects folder in here as well. Now, I'll come back to this because we'll want to make use of this in a moment. So, right, this is my folder that's got all my content that I'm going to load in. So, right. Now, the thing is, the particular 3D application that I use doesn't like DDS files. It can't even load them. So, for me to be able to show the objects in my 3D application, I need to have the images in another format. But you'll need the DDS textures anyway. So what you can do is get your files prepared beforehand. I'll actually show you. I've got, because actually before I do that, I'll show you what objects I'm going to be working with. This is my 3D application. So there's going to be a taxi, a van, an ash tree, and a spruce tree. And this is my patented star-shaped tree rather than an X tree. It doesn't look quite right in here because the different planes of transparency going over each other kind of screw up a little bit, but I find that X trees just look a little bit sort of fuller. They don't look quite so much like they're flat planes. But anyway, right, now a little bit of information that you need to be aware of before you even get as far as loading Xpacker. You need to prepare your models beforehand. Each object needs to have a material or surface, and any textures must be UV mapped. They can't just be tile mapped. So for example, this taxi, it's got a material called Taxi 1, and sorry, it's on the other screen. This is the image map that's been used, and I should be able to show you. Yeah, there's the UV map, and that's the image to go with it. So all your objects need to be UV mapped, and they need to have an individual surface. If two objects use the same texture and the same material, that's fine. But you can't have one material using two completely different... You can't have two objects using the same material but having different textures applied. So you have to make sure in those cases that every material is an individual one. In this case, all my objects only use one material at any time anyway. So it's like the taxi only uses the taxi material. But say for example you had a streetlight object. You might have the texture for the pole is just a standard metal texture, and then the texture for the light, the actual bulb part of the streetlight, is a different texture. So for that you would need to make two materials, one called pole, one called light, and each one would have its own UV mapping and its own textures applied to it. That's important. You need to respect that rule, otherwise your materials won't look right when you load them into Racetrack Builder. So what you should you export your object. Once you're happy with how it is in your 3D application, export your object with whatever settings you would have used. I presume most people that are making a track in Racetrack Builder have at least looked at KS Editor. You will need to use it at some point if you haven't. Even using Racetrack Builder, you will need to use KS Editor at some point. So you need to go and learn it. I forgot where I was going with that. No, never mind. Okay. Oh, I remember. Sorry. Your export settings. If you played with KS Editor before, you would have had to have exported out of a 3D application as FBX at some point already. Use exactly the same settings as you used then for this. Xpacker and Racetrack Builder work on exactly the same scale of unit. So I think in most of them you have to set it to metric. In my case, when I export as FBX, I have to scale it by a factor of 0.01. For some reason, although this although this application is set in meters, for some reason when it converts, it comes out 1,000 times too big. So I have to scale it by 0.01 to keep it at the same size. So whatever settings you use normally for exporting FBX for a setter, use those settings again. So we'll take this as we've exported our objects as FBX. No, I don't want to save any of them. And we've got two tree FBXs. Those are just the actual models for that 3D application Lightwave that I was using. And the two textures. Basically you can ignore those parts. It's those parts that are needed. It's the FBX file and the DDS texture. All this was just so I could load them into Lightwave. And I've also got the two vehicles there as well. I've got the two FBXs and the two DDSs, and those ones were just reference for me. If you are able to use DDS textures in your 3D application, then things will be a little bit easier for you once we get to Xpacker. Because what I'll do, I'll load my FBX model in, but it will still have the JPEG as the texture. So all I'll do is tell it to change the texture to be the DDS version. But if you already had the DDS applied as the texture and you export as FBX, that will be the texture that it automatically reads anyway. So you won't have to do that step. Right, now, before I showed you the actual 3D models, I was about to talk about some of the files. So, it's the Dds Textures. We can move those to our Xpack folder before we even start loading any objects. And what it means is that when we get into Xpacker, the textures will already be there. It just means that it keeps things easier to work with. You don't have to keep clicking load, you can just click in. Where is it? Oh yeah, for the materials. Instead of having to click load and add a new material, add a new texture, you can just click pick and it'll call up a list of all the textures that are used. So what we will do, we'll actually close Xpacker for the moment because I need to do something. So in the that's that one. In the textures folder, I'm going to create two new folders. One called trees and one called cars. And then what I'm going to do is copy my two Dds Textures to the cars folder and copy my two tree textures no, I didn't want to do that. That's what I wanted. Now what that means is when we reload Xpacker it will automatically know that those Dds textures are in those folders. So that's what I'll do now. So we've got File, Open, Example. Click OK. Now obviously we still have nothing in Objects or cross sections or materials, but in Textures we've got two folders, and in there are the two textures. It tells us, and our two tree textures. Now this file name, it's a little confusing. It's not related to your actual computer locations. It's just local to the Xpacker folder. So you'd have, like, if I come back to this, it is literally these, what you see here. So we created the two texture folders and it created the two folders for us. You can do exactly the same in materials and in objects and in string objects. You always have the path and the name. You can just have the name if you want, and when you load objects in, they will all just be in one big lump here. But for good housekeeping, if you've got different sorts of objects, then it's usually better to separate them up. I think it also makes a difference when trying to look for them, to swap different objects out actually within Racetrack Builder. So I think it makes a difference there. So it's always best to, it's just good housekeeping. Sorry, having a sip of my coffee. Actually, I'm going to have another one. Okay, so now we'll get to the fun stuff. We shall load an object. So it's quite easy. Just make sure we have still got our Xpack open. Yes, we have. So add, and then I don't know, desktop example. We'll load the two cars first. Start with a taxi, and it's loaded. But as I said before, it is just lumped in the main directory. And if we have a look in objects, let's just put the taxi there. And materials, objects, taxi. It's created all the stuff. So that is the root folder, the object name, the material name. So you can tidy all that up. You could turn that into, which I will do in a moment, I'll just show you actually. But we'll start with the object, which is what we just loaded in. So we can change that path to something like cars/taxi and hit save straight away. Oh, sorry, there we go. My deliberate mistake, I wanted to show you. It's this that it's referring to, the group name. It has to have a group of some sort. These aren't really settings or anything. They don't actually designate what the object is to Assetto Corsa. This is literally just for within Racetrack Builder, and I'll show you what it does. I took a picture earlier. When you select objects in Racetrack Builder, you have this drop down menu, and you've got buildings, cone, grass, rumble strip, signs and tyres. Buildings, sign, rumble strip, tyres, it's those. All it does, if you select one of those categories in Racetrack Builder, it only shows the objects for those. Like at the moment that's set on all objects, so it's showing the grandstand, the cones, grass and some signposts. But if I set that to just cone, it would only show those 5 objects there. So it helps split Racetrack Builder up into different groups. Now you don't have to use one of those, you can make up your own. Like that says car. Now we have loaded in a car, so we could use that if we wanted, but equally if we wanted we could call it banana and click save. And when you go into Racetrack Builder, you would have, and you loaded your Xpack in this list. Now you would have buildings, you would have all objects, banana, buildings, cone, grass and all the rest of them. And if we clicked on banana, it would show only that taxi up here. So that's what group does. You have to have one, but it can be anything you like. It just represents a category essentially for where the objects go, but we'll call that something sensible. Vehicles. We won't use any of the original names. Now it doesn't appear in the list if you type it, so you have to be careful. You can put in a description if you like, you don't need to, that's not important. Now as these are just example objects, I'm going to go through this quite quickly. All this object is for is it's going to sit in the background somewhere. It's a low polygon model anyway, and it's just going to be used as background filler if you have like a parking lot area on your track. So you can throw a few cars in and it just gives extra stuff in the background. So we don't need it to be drivable. We don't need it to use collisions because it's going to be in a parking lot way back. It doesn't need to move anywhere. We do want to see it. Do you want this object to receive shadows? No, we don't really need to, but if you did want it to, then you can. Does this object receive lights, like street lights, headlights? Well, if we're using it for Assetto Corsa, no, because Assetto only has one light source, and that's the sun. And then you got your no clip bit here. You got shadow, cast a shadow, none, cast a shadow, or shadow only. What that does, it means it doesn't show the object, it just shows the shadow that object would cast. So normally you'd want object cast a shadow. You can either have solid or you can have texture. And if you hover over it, it tells you what it does. Shadow type solid is a squarish shadow, and texture, if your material that's applied to this has an alpha channel, so for example a tree, then the shadow would be the proper shadow. It would have the little holes in it and it would be tree shaped. So you could do that, but for this it's just a car, it doesn't have an alpha channel, so it can be left on solid. A special purpose, most of the time this is just going to be an object, but there are other options there that you can choose from. Now you can click save. Well, you could have clicked save as soon as you entered a group name, but I just wanted to quickly go through that part. So we've saved it and that's updated it. Now if we go back to our examples and go into objects, we've now got a cars folder, and in it is the taxi, and that's cool. So it's automatically put it in, and you can actually have a look at all this sort of stuff. The JPEG that it always puts next to it is the little icon that you would see in like this picture. The icon is that. At the moment, if you click on it, it's default icon, please replace. So what you can do is your object, you've got load icon, and you could go and find a pic. If you like what I'd done for my Xpack, I got all my cars together and I took a picture of them, and then I used that picture as the cancel that. I used that picture as the main Xpack picture, and then I also took other pictures, individual ones of each car and each tree and things like that, and I had them as my icons for my objects. Now icons need to be, if I remember correctly, yeah, that says 64 by 64 JPEG, but the one that it creates is 128 by 128. So what I suggest is not loading the icon by clicking the button. What you want to do is, if you've got your icon, like if you've got your picture and it's 128 by 128, because you always want the slightly higher res picture so it looks nicer, get your 128 by 128 icon, call it the same as the blank one, and just replace it directly in the folder here. You never, even when you load the icon through this, you never actually see the icon in Xpacker. You only see the icon when you see them in Racetrack Builder up here. That's the only time you actually see the icon. So you might as well do it in here. It'll work perfectly fine. Right, on to the next one. Randomness. If you want the object to be slightly bigger or slightly smaller, or have a little bit of rotation, you can adjust these. They're all minimum and maximum for X, Y and Z coordinates. This is for child objects. I personally haven't messed with this part yet, and as this tutorial is just for getting basic objects into the program, then we won't be covering that. All lights. Now normals, this is something that you need to pay attention to, because otherwise the object won't look quite right in Racetrack Builder. Sometimes it'll come out looking darker, or it can come out looking a little bit flat. It does tell you some stuff here. This object is one-sided material on triangles. This is good for enclosed objects like houses, but not good if an object is a grass or tree object. Consider creating double-sided faces if this object is not fully enclosed. Well, a car is. It's essentially a box, so it's enclosed, so we don't need double-sided. But if it was just a tree, like some flat planes or a flat plane for a piece of grass, I'd recommend clicking the double-sided faces button, and you click it and it says faces are now two-sided, click save to make the changes permanent. So click save, and you've got your normals here. You've got faceted up for grass and sphere for trees. Basically, if it's not a flat sheet like grass, or just a flat wall, it's like a string object that's going to go around the very, very edge of your map. A good example is another one that I made, and it's like the wall of trees. You'd use up for grass. If you've got an actual tree like an X tree or a Y-shaped tree, use sphere, but for anything else, use faceted. And hit create normals. So normals have been created. Click save to make changes permanent. So basically, if you click either double-sided or create normals, you must save after it. I'm not 100% sure, but I think if you click create double-sided faces and then click create normals and hit save, it only remembers the normals, because you've done it won't. I don't think it remembers the double-sided, or vice versa. If you do create normals and then create double-sided and save, it'll only remember the create double-sided. I think it's because you've done something else in between. It also happens anywhere along here. Like, if you put the group name in there and you don't hit save, you change over to one of these tabs, when you come back, it's forgot that. It's forgot what you typed in there because you didn't save it. So you, once you've done with anything on that page, click save, and then in the normals, after doing either of those, click save. Right. So that's the object actually in, and it has a material. But I don't like the way it's separating that, so what we will do is, so that's the actual material. So I'm going to change that path. I'm going to call it cars/taxi. Click save, and it's changed it. And then what we can do, when we load our next object in, it too will try and create a path that says objects van1/van1. And what we will do, we will change that path name to cars van, and it'll add the van1, instead of being down here in another folder, it'll add it to the cars folder. But right, for the moment, materials, this is essentially exactly the same as KS Editor. So if you've ever had an attempt at trying to build a track and load it into KS Editor, and you have to set up the materials, this is what you use it for. And this is done exactly the same. So our material is called taxi, and the shader type is diffuse only. You have other sorts: diffuse and normal, diffuse and specular, diffuse normal and specular, diffuse multiply and add, and like that'll have your diffuse texture, your multiply texture, and your additive texture. Now at the moment we haven't got either of those applied, but we have got that one. But so what you would do, you would, if you've pre-copied all your textures into your texture folder ready, like I did, you could just click pick, and see, these are the textures I was on about. It's got the DDS's that we loaded in before, and it's also got the JPEG texture that was applied to the taxi object from Lightwave. So you could just pick rather than having to click load and add them in. But we're not using that sort of thing anyway. You got multi-map, which is the one that uses the diffuse normal, and then that's the RGB image, and each of the three channels controls something different. I think it's green is specular, red channel is specular, green is glossiness, I think, and blue is roughness. You've then also got a detail texture and a detail normal texture, and you've also got 3D grass, which is your track texture, and then a variant. Not sure what the variant does, never actually used it. Anyway, for our purpose we only need diffuse only, because it has only got a diffuse texture, and our texture is the brittaxi.jpg. But remember I said I was going to have to switch that over to use the DDS, and if you was already using DDS textures in your 3D application, you wouldn't need to do this part. Well, this is what I was talking about. If you already had DDS textures assigned to the model, it should say like brittaxi.dds, but I've got to change mine over because I already copied them all into my Xpack already, I can just select it and click OK, and it's now changed it to that one. We don't need to adjust the scaling or anything. If it's a UV map thing anyway, you never need to, because it's always scaled 1 to 1. But if you could create a complete new material that has nothing to do with an object, because that's what a road texture is. You're only using one object, the road, but you could have 10 different road textures you'd like to use. So each one of those would be a different material, made up of a diffuse texture, a normal map, and a few other images. You can create just a material and save those, and in RTB, then when you load it into RTB, you can do your road and you say, oh, I want a different material, and just pick a material without actually having to change a road. But that's the only time that any of this sort of stuff comes into play. You never need to worry about it for standard UV mapped objects. So that was the properties. Oh, and for RTB purposes, it determines which screen within RTB that will display this material. So will it appear in track cross sections? Will it appear in walls? Will it appear in terrain? Now here's a slight bug which I've noticed. Will it appear in terrain? A lot of times for normal objects, normal UV mapped objects, you won't have a different material, so you don't want it to appear in any menu or in any list, so you can just not tick it there. We can, if you make any changes, or if you do anything like, you could make it appear in that list. Always click save, and then in the next tab we can ignore rFactor2. We're not doing stuff for rFactor2, we're doing stuff for a setter. This is how it's lit. So you got your ambient lighting, your diffuse lighting, your specular, and your specular power. Now for a lot of things you don't need to change these much. If I remember correctly, 0.1 I think, if your object has a transparency map, a transparent alpha channel, sorry, and you need to use transparency on your object, then you can choose alpha blend or alpha test. For trees, I think you use alpha test, and I'll actually be showing you that a bit later. But as this is a taxi and it doesn't, oh, I'll just quickly show you. If you was doing a tree and you had it on alpha test, you'll also click the KS tree shader box. Exports to AC's tree shader instead of the standard KS per pixel material. But this isn't a tree, so we won't use that, and it's not using any of that. So we've altered the specular slightly. A lot of it, if you're going from Racetrack Builder, if you're exporting that to a 3D application, it doesn't really matter what settings you use for the specular, because you can, all that will get transferred to your 3D application, and you can set things anyway, and then you'd export to KS Editor and tweak all your materials properly in there. But if you was going directly from Racetrack Builder to KS Editor, then yes, set your materials here and it will create a persistence file for you, and when you load the FBX into KS Editor, it should read all the materials. So you can set them there. So we've set our material, we've made sure it's got the right texture, click save. Now adjust our textures. Right, we'll load another object, the other car, which would be the van. Oh, actually I'll delete for a moment. Before, when we loaded the first object, it loaded with its own folder structure. Well, the thing was, when I loaded the second one, I was still clicked on cars, so when I clicked add, it automatically adds it into that folder. If you want, you can add it. I'll show you. You can add it and change that to vans. Oh, spelt wrong. There we go. Vans. And we'll give it a group. We'll call it vans. And just click save for the moment. And see, it does that. But if we wanted cars / van 1. And what did we call that one? Oh, vehicles. Okay. See, I didn't click save, so it's undone those changes. That's what I was talking about. So, cars, still spelt wrong. We'll change that to vehicles. No, we don't need shadow. And all those settings are fine. So we click save, and there you go. It would add it back in. So if you loaded objects from different places and it put them into different folder groups there, you could change them back in, and so make sure they're all okay. So we then go over to our normals, and we don't need double-sided because it's an enclosed box, but we want to create normals. If I remember correctly, faceted is basically whatever direction the actual polygon itself is facing, that's the direction that the normal will face. So if you've got just a cube, which is 6 sides, one pointing in every direction, and you click faceted, it would make one of each of the normals point in one of the 6 directions. If you'd got a car, which is a slightly more complex shape, it'll make all the normals face in the same shape as the car. So create normals, click save. That's all that really you have to do with an object. It's just add it, set a group. For most stuff, if you're not colliding with it, you don't need any of this any of these settings. You can literally just make sure render is on because you'll want to see it, but you don't need any sort of interaction. So just set your name, your path and your name, a description if you like, your group, and then hit save. Then come over to your normals and either create your normals or make it double-sided, or if it's inside out, you can click flip faces, or in this case, like it says there, for one-sided objects that have triangles facing the wrong way. So if you make a tree and when you load it everything seems to be facing the wrong way, which means your tree will look invisible, I think. If you click flip faces, it will flip the normals the other way, flip the polygons the opposite way, and you should be able to see them again. But for this, create normals, save. And then we go into the materials and see it's done it again. It loaded the material and done its own path. So what we will do is, actually we'll remove all that because we're going to change its complete name, cars / van. Just click save. There we go. Let's put both of them in there. Right, so our properties. Now this is going to be easy because it's default. Curious. Okay, but it doesn't matter. Right, so materials, yeah, just default, diffuse. Actually, it's an object, so we'll set it. I'll set that one as well, object, because they are just objects. Don't know why it's decided to give it a blank van.1.dds. What it should be is that one. So we'll save that. Then in a set a cursor tab, I'll just drop the specularity a little bit. Click save. Yeah, they're both okay. So we've got our 2 textures in our cars folder, which are the DDSs, and we've got these ones which will be the JPEGs, and the blank DDS thing that it created. We will actually get rid of them later. Actually, we could do it now if we like. You click delete and click delete. It only works if it's no longer in use. If it's been used by anything, it won't let you delete it, and the same for the materials. If the material is in use, it won't let you delete it. If you was loading a lot of objects and having to switch the textures as well, so in that objects folder that we just got rid of, you had a load of textures. You don't have to delete them one by one. What you could do is switch back over to your folder, and in textures, see we've got cars, objects and trees. The old folder that it removed from this list was objects, cars, van 1. If we have a look, objects, cars, van 1. So what you can do is just delete that, because this is the exact same thing as this. We've got our two folders with our two DDS textures, so you can just delete that sort of thing directly within Explorer itself. Okay, so that is the two cars. They're loaded in. Okay, so now what we'll do, we will load in some trees. So I'll come back out of there, trees, and we'll go for ash. Now this isn't a car, so we'll change that. Trees. Make sure our group is set. We do have one for trees, but we will call this not trees. Just click save. There we go. So we've got our objects separated, and again, if we look in our objects folder, we've now got cars, and because we've created a new path here, we've got trees here. So we've got our object in, shadow. Now did we cast a shadow with this? Oh, we did cast a shadow with the first one. We forgot to set it on the second one. My apologies. Right. With the trees, we do want a shadow. Save. And we want, now hopefully your DDS should have an alpha channel, otherwise your tree isn't going to be transparent anyway. So you can set that to texture, and that'll mean you have a proper shadow from your trees. Yeah, that's everything. Click save. Normals. Create double-sided faces. Yes, because it's a tree. We want it to be visible from both sides. And the sphere. Create normals. Save. And that means that whatever angle you look at it from, you should always be able to see the planes on the tree, the flat planes on polygon planes on the tree, and the normals. Excuse me. The normals mean that it should appear correctly as well. Right. And it is using a material called objects, cars, ash. If you click on it, it will take you directly to the materials and actually that material. So first of all, what we will do, we will change all this. Trees. Save. There we go. So our materials are nice and tidy again. Now, properties. Just a diffuse map, so that's okay. An object, and click save. Oh yeah, change the texture. We've got the trees, it's ash. Save that. Then we'll switch over to the Assetto Corsa tab. Now for trees, you want it a lot different. You want it 0.001 and 0.001. The transparency alpha test 0.5, and use KS tree shader instead of the standard KS per pixel map. Now you can alter these values quite happily. Like I said, these are the exact same material settings you'll encounter in KS Editor. It just means that it'll alter the appearance in Racetrack Builder when you see them. But these are quite good values. They was the default values that come with the Winter Trees pack that comes with Xpacker and Racetrack Builder. So these were the settings that we used for them, so I just went with those and it seems to work quite well. So yeah, we saved our material, that's good. Again, see it's created another one of those. But what I'll do in a minute, I'll load the other tree and then I'll get rid of those in one go by deleting them in the folder. So spruce, we called this not trees, didn't we? Yeah, called it not trees, that's good. Because we was already clicked on trees when we loaded it, it automatically put it in the trees folder, which was good. If we'd accidentally clicked on cars and loaded it, it would have automatically added it to the cars folder. So on the spruce we want cast the shadow and texture, click save. In normals and faces we want double-sided, save, and sphere. It always remembers whichever one you had used last while the program's open. So if you load 5 trees, you only need to click on sphere once, and each time you come back to the normals and faces panel, it'll still be on sphere. But if you change it to another one, it'll remember that. So create the normals, save those as well. And it says we're using this material, which is again a bit long-winded. We can close the cars, minimize the cars one, we don't need that. So it's quite long-winded, we just want it in there. So alter the name, or rather alter the path, and it puts it all tidy. Right, so it's an object, it's just a diffuse, click save, 0.001, 0.001, alpha test, 0.5, and KS shader. Click save. Oh, and still using PNG, so we'll switch that to spruce DDS and click save. And then, like I said, we've got those still hanging about, and we could delete them one at a time there. It's a shame that you can't just click that and say delete. It doesn't let you. But what we can do is every time we click save on any of these buttons or any of these panels, it's constantly updating. Or if we create a new path in one of the different tabs, it's always constantly updating the folder structure. So what we can do is, there we go, those are our PNGs, the objects. If we look in there, it was that one, the objects. So we can just delete that. Open Xpack, example, now it's gone. So you can delete multiple files in one go. All you got to do is just reopen the Xpack again, so it clears all the listing and it can reread the file structures. Okay, that is done. That's objects finished. All you need to do now is zip to RTB, and what it will do, it will take that folder structure, that folder with all that stuff in it, and it's essentially the same as doing add to a RAR or add to a zip, and all it does is adds it to a zip file. But what it does, it adds it in your documents, racetrack builder, Xpacks folder, and then when you load up Racetrack Builder, you can load a new Xpack and it reads from this place. So actually I'll do that because you'll see it happen. File, zip to RTB. About to create Xpack example. Yes. And there it is. So, now to test it. Unfortunately, you can't have Xpacker and Racetrack Builder open at the same time. So, close that. Call up Racetrack Builder. And we will call this example. Okay. Just subdivide it a little bit. And we'll make that small. Okay. So onto our objects. Now remember I said about the group name affecting this. We will load an Xpack and we're going to load examples. Now like I said, if you'd added a picture, it'll do like that or like that, but as we didn't, because this is just an example, it won't show it. Also, we haven't got any icons for any of our objects because I didn't add them, but you should have. But now if we have a look, we've got not trees and we've got vehicles, and if we click not trees, it'll add the two. That's the ash and that's the spruce. Yeah, we'll add them. Single objects, one there and one there. Let's have a closer look. There we go. And if we're going to do vehicles, the taxi and the van, so we'll add those as well. We'll go one of them and one of them. There you go, there is the taxi and the van. Actually, that doesn't look right. It's them normals. The normals for the trees are fine, but that taxi looks a lot darker than it should be. Okay. Well, those are the objects working, so that's it. I'll just go over it again quickly. Racetrack Builder, Xpacker. Now, if you make any changes, like I said, if you wanted to, for example, add an icon, add a main picture, or add an icon for your van, or for your spruce tree, you can. But really, it's just a case of add your object, set the path, give it a group name, set your shadow if you want it to use shadow. Actually, what we'll do, since that we're here, so it was on faceted. Oh, hang on, I think I know what it might be. It might be the double-sided polygons thing. Because it was an enclosed area, we created double-sided polygons, it may have been that. But generally, like I said, for the car objects, I'm sure I used faceted, in my Xpack that I created, I'm sure I used faceted for the vehicles, but you definitely use sphere for the trees, and up for flat sheets, whether it's grass, which is a tiny object, or for a wall of trees. And I think you could also do it for like flat fences as well, like chain link fences for walls, because that's just a flat sheet as well. So I think you use up for grass for that one as well. And just save it. But yeah, if I wanted to, for example, like oh, hang on. I'm not going to create oh, I didn't create double-sided textures for that one. Okay, that's fair enough. Doesn't matter. But yeah, so just set your normals. Like I said, for most things it would be faceted. A lot of times you don't even need to create the normals, they've already been created in your 3D application. All this is doing is just retweaking them. But a lot of times there's no need to even do that. And a lot of times you don't need to, if it's a normal object like a car or a house or even a 3D person, you wouldn't need double-sided faces. You only need double-sided faces if it's a flat sheet that you can't see, like a tree. An X tree is just two flat sheets crossed over each other, and you can only see them from one side unless you make them double-sided. So that's the only time you'd really need double-sided as well, is for trees. But yeah, so that's it. I think in the next video I'm going to show you how to do string objects. Most of it is exactly the same. You have to load the parts in, the different parts of the string. If you're using more than one part, you might only want one. But if you're using more than one part, then you have to load each individual part in and then sort of put them all together in an order to make the string. But I'll show you that on the next video. Until then, have fun and go make some Xpacks. Bye.